Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. We're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court decision allowing states, if they choose, to legalize sports betting. Back with us is Sean Logan of the State Gaming Control Board, and joining us now is Chuck Berry, adjunct professor in sports arts and entertainment management at Point Park University's Rowland School of Business. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Chuck, nice to have you here. So the reaction of the sports leagues has been interesting. The NBA, I think, has been the most proactive in saying this is something we can work with. NFL has been, no, until now, things are changing. What do you make of the way that the leagues are reacting to this?
There's quite an irony here, because if you go back to 1992, when the bill was passed, some of the biggest backers of the bill were the NCAA and the professional leagues.
Okay, you're talking about the bill that the Supreme Court just ruled was unconstitutional.
Exactly.
Okay.
The professional and, let's see, it's the professional, well, whatever the name is.
It was intended to protect the integrity. Professional
and Amateur Sports Protection Act.
Okay.
In 1992. So the NCAA was very much behind it. Football, baseball, hockey, basketball, all were very much behind it. 6 years ago, when New Jersey initiated the sports legislation, the lawsuit that was filed was brought by the NCAA, football, basketball, hockey, all four of the major sports. So very much opposed to it. And yet, at the same time, the NBA you mentioned, the NBA has actually a financial stake in some of the fantasy leagues that have cropped up in recent history. All the leagues had been very much opposed to anything to do with Las Vegas, and now you see one of the most successful teams in the NHL, the Las Vegas team, with our Fleury over there, being extremely successful. You're seeing the NFL coming down there in 2 years, with the Oakland Raiders moving to Las Vegas. And who's going to be the biggest beneficiary of this ruling? Probably the NCAA and the four professional leagues, because all of a sudden you're going to get a lot more eyeballs on their sports. You're going to get a lot more interested people watching. The television ratings are likely to go up. I saw a study that said that if you take normal followers of a sport, and let's say they will watch 16 baseball games a year on TV. If you're gambling, those people are likely to watch twice as many games. And also, you're going to see the leagues going after an integrity fee. They want 1% of the action, supposedly to enforce, to make sure that no one in their league is getting involved with the gambling or being affected by the gambling.
So they want to be paid to monitor things, to make sure that everything's on the up and up when there's all of this money floating around.
They want a piece of the money, is what they want.
But you're
that's the argument they're making.
They're cloaking it.
That's how they're cloaking it, exactly. And I find that ironic too, because for years and years, you know, sports has had its problems. You can go back to the 1919 White Sox scandal and shoeless Joe Jackson. Right. Paul Hornung suspended for a year with Green Bay back in the 1960s. Pete Rose, and it was actually the Pete Rose suspension that really pushed the 1992 legislation to begin with. So there have been incidents, and I've been involved with baseball for many years, and I know that every clubhouse, minor league, major league, you'll find large signs up there about gambling. You also find it about performance-enhancing drugs, but they really harp on these things. At the beginning of every season, each league will have security officers in talking to the players about you can't gamble, you can't associate with shady characters, drugs and other things that they'll go over as well. But the leagues have been very strong on this. It's good that they are. But they don't need a 1% integrity fee. They
and recognize in our four corners of Act 42, an integrity fee is not in there. And that's something that the gaming board can't impose. We can't impose a tax. We have to say, okay, here's the license fee is the $10 million that Senator Costa talked about, and here's the tax rate at 36%, 34% tax rate, 2% local share. So it's not the gaming board now. We can't impose that 1% or 2% integrity fee that Chuck talked about.
Right.
That would have to go back to the legislature, and there's probably a slim chance that this Act 42 would be amended again.
It would have to go back to the legislature, or aren't the leagues pursuing a national policy? Don't they want Congress to say, here are some national guidelines that every state has to follow?
Congress, in the ruling, the Supreme Court, wasn't the 1992 law did not prohibit sports gambling. The 1992 law prohibited the states from taking action to allow gambling. So it was the 10th Amendment argument that these rights are reserved to the states and the federal government shouldn't be taking steps to not allow them to do that. However, the federal government can take steps to control gambling. So yes, the leagues are pushing for national legislation. Now, the way things are in Congress right now, the chances of that succeeding, I think, might be slim. One of the things that the leagues don't like is the fact that now, instead of having to deal maybe with just national legislation, they have to go around to 50 different states, 49, because actually Utah has it in its constitution, not allowing any gambling in the state of Utah. So let's say 49 states.
Chuck, how much what is now illegal sports gambling is going on, and how much of that will be transferred to legit? Or are we going to add people who would never do illegal gambling and say, oh, this is fun?
I think a significant amount. I think illegal gambling will continue. Mm-hmm. I mean, they will be, they're not subject to the taxes. Illegal gambling has never really been cracked down on that significantly. Super Bowl pools, right. So a lot of things like that. So I think you'll still see illegal gambling.
I'm trying to think in a few terms here. Is gambling a vice, and is this something like a sin tax, what we're doing here? I'm not...
You can go down, I mean, you talk about slippery slopes. I mean, certainly there's that argument that we shouldn't be doing this in the first place, that you take a look at the gambling addicts out there. There's a lot of things to be said against gambling, that it should be prohibited, but that's not where we've gone in the past. That's not where we're going in the future.
That's a 25-year-old debate, right? Sure. I mean, we started talking about riverboat casinos back in the 90s, and all that was discussed. Here's an issue that people talk about. You know, if I'm a $10 million a year running back in the NFL, I'm not going to be influenced to fumble the ball to change the point spread in the last few minutes, because I don't need the money. But if I'm a college athlete and I'm a senior and I know that I'm not going to be drafted and I can change the outcome of a game or change the point spread of a game, that's where the vulnerability is, perhaps. And if you're a sports purist, I wonder where you're coming from this personally. And from a public policy standpoint, these are questions you must have dealt with when you were in the legislature. From a sports fan, though, a sports fan's perspective, does this feel good? You know, in Britain, they say, oh, there's legalized betting on soccer and everything's doing fine there. But what do you think, Chuck?
I'm not a big fan of the NCAA to begin with. I find them to be very hypocritical in the way they go about their business. Just take a look at the difference between Penn State and Michigan State right now with the whole Nassar scandal up there, and nothing's been done up there. It's an issue. I think that, and the issue of gambling with sports, one thing that influences me is the fact that in 1990, in the 1960s, even in the 1980s and 90s, coverage was not as pervasive as it is now. Media coverage in particular. Smartphones taking pictures everywhere. Anything that any athlete does is likely to be exposed these days. So I think that is one reason why athletes will be less likely to get involved or to be enticed by gamblers, because it would be so hard to hide this type of thing in this day and age with the pervasive coverage that we see.
As a regulator, wouldn't you be more comfortable just dealing with games of chance, numbers, as opposed to dealing with human activity, where human frailties are involved and temptations abound?
Yeah, I got to be careful, because it is a quasi-judicial board, so I have to be careful on what I say is good or bad and may jaundice a future opinion, and I don't want an applicant or a team to take anything I'm saying the wrong way. But the legislature was pretty specific in Act 42 on what we need to do. And again, I'll go back to 20 minutes ago. We want to make our facilities safe, and we want to make sure the game is fair. That's why when I hear folks saying, well, I've got to be ready, for the first kickoff this year, it's probably absolutely not going to be ready. Even if we were just dealing with one of those 6 issues, we probably couldn't get it up and ready. We want to do it right. We want to make sure that everything to protect the customer, to protect the player, protect as in those examples, that college student, protect the rivers and all our facilities and license holders. We want to do this thing right, and we're not going to rush through it.
Understood.
And as Sean said, it's going to take a little while, especially with other states. There's about 6 states, including Pennsylvania, that have legislation in place. There's another 20 or so that have enabling legislation started that it's going to take a while. It'll be interesting to come back in 2 years and see where this has gone and what the developments have been.
But if every state, sorry to interrupt, but if every state can limit the gambling, limit its residents to gambling on platforms that state sanctions, then there really isn't the kind of rush, right? I mean, it's not like Ohio building casinos ahead of Pennsylvania might get people in the habit of going to Pennsylvania. In this case, you can't move between, you can't cross borders.
You're right. And in the Gaming Board's opinion, there's no rush because we need to get it right.
Of course. All right. Sean Logan, thank you. Chuck Berry, thanks so much.
Thank you.
John Allison and I will be back with a final thought right after this.